Okay, it's 2 o'clock by my count. Welcome to Cabinet on the 27th of February 2020. This is obviously a remote meeting, and we will be asking officers and members to come in as necessary. Can I first take the first agenda point is apologies for absence. I think there are none, but what I will do is ask everybody to introduce themselves. In the first instance, I'm Councillor Neil Moore. I'm the Executive Leader and Cabinet Member for Corporate Resources. And who's next? Who wants to go next? Liz?
Good afternoon, Leader. I'm Liz Burnett. I'm Cabinet Member for Education and Regeneration and also Deputy Leader.
Okay, I'll go around the screen because it's easier for me. Margaret.
I'm Councillor Margaret Wilkinson, Cabinet Member for Housing and Building and Member for Gibbonsdown.
Thank you. Ben.
Thank you, Leader. I'm Councillor Ben Graham, Cabinet Member for Social Care and Health, and my ward is Plymouth Ward in Penarth.
Thank you. Eddie.
Thank you, Leader. I'm Cabinet Member for Legal, Regulatory and Planning, and the representative for Clancy Major Ward.
Okay, and then I'll call in Catherine, but the camera's off, the look of it. Catherine?
I think I'm on now. Thank you, Leader. I'm Councillor Catherine McCaffer, representative of Plymouth Ward in Penarth and Cabinet Member for Leisure, Arts and Culture.
Thank you very much. And we have some officers with us too. Rob Thomas is the manager. Oh, sorry, Peter King's in the middle. I forgot the middle. Sorry, Peter, carry on.
Not at all, Leader. Thank you anyway. Councillor Peter King, Cabinet Member for Neighbourhood Services and Transport.
Thank you. Apologies. Rob Thomas.
Yeah, good afternoon. Rob Thomas, Managing Director for the Vale Council.
And we have Marcus Goldsworthy.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, Marcus Goldsworthy, Head of Regeneration and Planning.
Thank you. And the other one is Matthew Swindell, who's our admin person. Who's going to try and keep us in order. Okay, thank you.
Sorry,
you've missed someone.
Who have I missed? Who else is you?
It's Miles.
Sorry, Miles. I didn't know you were in there. Come on, Miles, you must have come in late. I didn't see you. Miles, can you want to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, sorry, Leader. Good afternoon. I'm Miles Punter. I'm the Director of Environment and Housing.
Thank you. Okay, apologies. Didn't see you on the screen. Okay, next item is the minutes of the last meeting. Can I ask whether or not everybody agrees that they are the correct minute?
Yeah.
Everybody agree? Yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much. The next item is to receive declarations of interest. If there are any from any member, I think there probably are none.
No.
Unless anybody wants to speak now. Okay, and in terms of the agenda, I'm going to change things around a little, if that's okay with you. We have some urgent items, which is the minutes of the Corporate Performance Resources Scrutiny Committee. I'm going to take that at number 11. But there's also a report, number 8, which is the review of Welsh Government consultation papers, which is a report for the Cabinet Member Legal, Regulatory and Planning Services. Because I know that at least one member here, Rob, might have to declare an interest, we will take that as a last item on the agenda today. Okay, so yeah. Without any further ado, unless anybody's got anything to say beforehand, I will start with the first report, which is the closure of accounts for 2019-20. So report from myself, the accounts are complete, and this report is to inform Cabinet of the provisional financial settlement, or the provisional financial position for the Council for 2019-20 financial year. The year-end revenue position was break-even after a net transfer to the reserves of £2.55 million, and you could see that in the report on page 4. That's made up of £0.822 million drawdown from the Council Fund and £3.37 million transferred into reserves. The council fund currently stands at £12.814 million as of the 31st of March 2020. And again, you can see that in Appendix 4 to the report. A revenue savings target of £3.02 million was set for 2019-20. However, savings of £2.83 million, which is 79%, were actually achieved. And again, if you want to see where that is, that's in Appendix 5 to the report. The housing revenue account was also able to increase its level of its ring-fence reserves to £7.948 million after achieving a £5.28 million surplus. And again, you can see that in Appendix 2 to the report. There was a capital expenditure during the year of £53.144 million also, and that's also can be found in Appendix 3. What I'd like to do is to just go through some highlights in terms of the provisional financial position of the council. These figures are now subject to external audit, and the final statement of accounts will be presented to council in September. But obviously, I think I will have to put a caveat on that, on the basis that I'm assuming that hopefully there'll be no spike or resurgence of COVID-19. If it is, then we'll obviously have to reconsider how we take that report. The report also contains details of revenue and capital budgets for 1920 and the current position with regard to the reserves held in the council, which I highlighted earlier. Just for confirmation, the revenue budget for 1920 was £226.098 million. I think I ought to reflect on the fact that Welsh Government always give us something called the SSA, Standard Spending Assessment, which is what we should be spending to. And that amounts to £228 million, just £101. So basically, our spend is still £2 million short of our SSA, which in terms of council tax would mean another 3.4% on the budget. And I think it's important to always highlight the fact that even though we have the spend as we do, we still don't meet the SSA target that Welsh Government gives us. Saying that, the outturn position of the £226 million budget was break-even position. However, some services did have to use reserves in order to balance their budgets in the last financial year. The details of that are shown on page 4 of the report, which highlights the net use of reserves by each directorate, and there were several. There is a great deal of detail in the report to inform members of the financial position, and in summary, I will talk about a couple of things. In terms of things like learning and skills, there was an overspend in the service, resulting in the requirement to pull down reserves at the end of year. The main pressures in terms of that service were the school transport costs, additional learning needs due to out-of-county placements or pupils with complex needs. And there are others, but they're all contained in the report. It should also be noted that during the year, the schools had to draw down a net sum of £1.84 million from their reserves in order to balance the budgets during the year. I'm happy to say that all the savings identified for learning and skills, which was £166,000, was achieved. In terms of social services, the overall service was underspent, which is a good result because it's much better than anticipated. The cost pressures were within children and family services due to the high cost of placements for children with significant complex behaviour. However, that position was offset, thankfully, during the year by a £500,000 grant from Welsh Government. This was also offset by an underspend in adult services due to some favourable variances. The favourable balance that has been achieved has actually now been set aside and put into legislative changes reserves. So they have that money is not lost to them, is kept for them for another day. The service is also required to make savings of £545,000 during the year. £40,000 of that wasn't made, but it should be made in 2021 because the service that they were going to deal with couldn't roll out because of the COVID-19. So that will roll into next year. In terms of environmental and housing, The net position for the Directorate was a balanced budget. However, they did have to draw down heavily on reserves to achieve it. This was reported during the year, so it's not as any particular shock to us, and some of it could be down to the fact that things like recycling treatments had to go elsewhere because of China refusing to take mixed recycling. As part of that revenue budget, they were also required to make savings of £1.14 million. And again, it's been reported through the year about these pressures, and some of them were going to be unlikely to be met. And at the end of the year, the total savings achieved were £560,000. So that pressure, in fairness, was acknowledged when the revenue budget for the current year was set, and we gave them an additional £400,000 to put back into their base budget as a case of, we know that this position is not going to change. In terms of the Managing Director and resources, underspans in this area have contributed to the Regeneration Fund and to the LDP reserve. In terms of the General Policy and Council Tax, in November 2019, a probable underspend in this area was shown at £6.5 million, and that was reported, and it was agreed that £4 million should be transferred to the Council Fund, with a decision made as to where the accounts, any other money would go at the end of the year. When the accounts were actually closed, £4.959 million was transferred into specific reserves, including things like, as I said, Neighbourhood Services Reserve, Education Reserve, etc. And again is contained in paragraph 233 of the report. The council tax surplus for 2019-20, as many people like to hear this, is £2.637 million, which actually was in line with what we considered to be £2.5 million when we reported in November. In terms of housing revenue account, that's fully detailed in Appendix 2, and the outturn on the year was £5.28 million surplus against the budget that was set. It's different from the one in November, mainly due to reduced spend on capital programme and money that have been placed in the revenue budget to fund some of this spend, partly due to the COVID-19 situation. In terms of capital budget, which is a major blank, the overall position of the revised capital programme was an underspend of £17 million for the year. Not surprising in some circumstances that we're in. Able to offer a continued managed capital programme, there was a slippage of £13 million, and that's been approved by a Managing Director's emergency powers. And again, there's some variances which are within the report. In terms of reserves and provisions, a schedule of all the reserves and the movements during 18-19 is shown in Appendix 4. It shows a table summarises the net movement and is shown in paragraph 2.88 in the report, and details a reduction of £822,000 in the council fund and an increase of £4.3 million in the level of specific reserves, and their reserves held by in different departments. £2 million of this is a result of the receipt from Welsh Government in terms of a grant, which came in late, so which was used instead of use of capital receipts. As I said, the level of reserves are detailed in the report and considered adequate for the council. It should be noted that there are large commitments against these reserves, and people seem to forget that in future years, and that's the main support of the capital programme. In addition, the COVID-19 pandemic is resulting in council having to support new services and new ways of working in order to provide support for residents in the Vale. Whilst the Welsh Government is providing support, it is anticipated that some of the additional costs will have to be met by this council. And we know that we've spent a considerable amount of money in terms of IT provision. We're getting some money back on that, but not all of it. But there are other spends due to the COVID-19 situation that we've had to consider. In terms of savings for 19-20, as I said, there was a savings of £3.2 million set, of which 79% were achieved. And again, as I said earlier, that's in Appendix 5 with more narrative. In terms of the funding to the capital programme, the funding to the capital programme is detailed in paragraph 4.6, and the use of reserves, capital receipts, Welsh Government grant and section 106 funding is there. It's a lot. I've taken time to do it because this is an online report. People that don't quite understand the closure of accounts report. It is all there. If anybody wants to look at it, I've highlighted something. So what I would like to do is to ask anybody if they've got any comments before we move to the final recommendations. Is there anybody who would like to make any comments in terms of their own? I see Councillor Ben Gray's got his hand up. Ben.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to particularly highlight the social services revenue budget position because members of council will be aware that during the year there was a prediction of an overspend, and obviously we come to this closure of accounts position and there is an underspend. I think this goes to highlight how hard it can be to pinpoint a particular point in time where your budget will land, but more importantly, this extra money is most undoubtedly going to be used to help fight COVID-19 response, and I imagine a very different position when we go forward. So this reassurance, this money is kept within social services for spending on those key issues that we've been making decisions on, is key. But also we often find that as winter pressures money comes into the system, other points in time in the year, the money comes into social services, we're not always able to spend it all by the particular point in the calendar. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that I'm very confident that when we were predicting we would be over, that was based on accurate predictions as to what we knew at the time. And it's pleasing to have the underspend, to be able to reinvest more of that into the reserves, and it's put us in the strongest possible position to bolster the services that are offered in response to COVID-19. But doubtless, all the committee later in the week, they'll be poring over the details of this, as well as when we get the audited accounts back to council. But I just wanted to raise that point.
No, fair point. And as I said, because there was some extra money, we put it back into the social services reserve, because we know that each year we have problems and we don't know how much money is coming from Welsh Government. And that's one of our issues, really. I think Liz has got her hand up. Councillor Burnett.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Just a couple of points to draw attention to. Firstly, paragraph 210 on page 6, where you'd already mentioned about the pressures on the education budget, and just to provide a little bit of context into the major pressures that we have with supporting children with very complex needs. Sometimes we don't have the facilities to support those children in the Vale of Glamorgan, and the type of facilities they need are away from the area, which can have huge costs on the budget. But obviously it's not something we would want to be doing unless necessary with children. And so it's worth mentioning the development of the loft and the borough provisions at Gladstone Primary School, which have allowed us to support a number of children with complex needs in the Vale of Glamorgan, and not having to move elsewhere. So that has been a really more productive development, supported by a Scholar Derry, and have been recognised as the first trauma-informed practice school in Wales. So some super stuff going on there. And then the only other thing was in terms of the capital programme, which is on Appendix C, looking at a total education capital budget of over 68 million, with only 202,000 difference between the budget as agreed and the budget going forward. Some things have to slip because they're delivered in school holidays, and so some things will be delivered this school holiday. But also the additional funding that we've had for school asset renewal from Welsh Government and money from elsewhere means that an awful lot of our schools are having repairs being undertaken, new boilers, which includes, adds to their fuel efficiency, and other stuff that there's been a backlog. So an awful lot of asset renewal going on at the moment within our schools.
Okay, thank you for that. and I think it's prudent to mention that in terms of a revenue budget, both social services and education make up nearly 3/4 of our budget altogether.
Yeah.
I think people forget that too. Okay, is anybody else, any other member wants to say anything, any other cabinet member? And I don't know if any officer would care to make any comment. If not, to me, can I move the recommendations, which simply are that the reports and the financial measures taken and proposed be approved, and that the report be referred to Scrutiny Committee, Corporate Performance and Resources for their consideration. And I'm sure they will certainly do that.
I'll second that, Leader.
Thank you very much. Is that agreed?
Yeah.
No dissent? Yep.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, in that case, I'll go on to the next thing, which is the budget strategy. This is something we have to do each year in terms of how we set our budget for 21-22. It includes proposals of the timescale too. So basically the report talks about asking us the Cabinet to approve a budget strategy for 21-22, including the requirement for directors to prepare initial revenue budgets in accordance with the timetable agreed by the Head of Finance. 2, that the director be requested to continue to progress the Shaping Services programme. And 3, that the Cabinet approve the following timetable for 21-22 budget process, subject to any amendments being required to meet the statutory deadlines as a result of the changes in the timing of the Welsh Government settlement announcement. And there is a table on page 2 of the report. I think what needs to be said, though, is as part of the settlement figure for 2021, Welsh Government didn't approve any indication of what the settlement would be for that year. The final revenue proposals we set last year, 2021, modelled a flat line settlement for 21-22 and 22-23. But it's prudent to reconsider that in some respect with the arrival of COVID-19 pandemic. It's going to be difficult to assess what settlement is going to come next year or even in the coming years, and particularly if Welsh Government review their specific grants, because grants are a particular important part of our income. There remains uncertainty also, considering our exit from the EU, and therefore that doesn't help in moving forward. However, we have to move forward. We have some issues in terms of things like the national living wage that we have to consider. That continues to be an impact. There's also potential for higher levels of pay awards this year. That's something which we have to consider, but also one of the main ones is COVID-19 and the effects that has had and will continue to have on welfare reform changes that could actually have a knock-on effect for councils in terms of things like higher arrears, increased homelessness, and homelessness is going to be a major one, particularly in terms of the recent pandemic, when we have made sure that there are no homeless on the street. But clearly, when the pandemic's over and we no longer required in some respects to put them into hotels, etc., or wherever we can house them, then I think we still need to look at that in the long term. There's also, as a result of the pandemic, greater demand on social services and other interventions. So this is not going to be an easy process because we don't know where we're starting from, to be fair. The proposals last year in 2021, it was considered that council tax would continue at 4.9%. And even if we did that, because we agreed we would do that for 21-22, 22-23, that would still leave us a shortfall in the funding of over £10.5 million. Obviously, all of this is going to have to be reviewed in the medium-term financial plan, which is coming in September. And savings need to be considered. What level of savings we can actually achieve is going to be an issue, particularly if we want to continue to operate our council services as we currently do. And we still don't know when the lockdown is going to finish and what, as a result of the lockdown, how things are going to proceed. We've continued to try and provide all our services, and I guess we're going to have to continue to do that too. So the budget strategy needs to be prepared. We need to prepare initial revenue budget. We need to prepare a capital budget. So in the report on page 2.5, it talks about the increased budgets and some of the issues that need to be considered there. Things like supplementary estimates will only be increased if it's part of a policy, etc. I'm not going to read them all. They're on 2.5 on page 2 and page 3. Then on paragraph 2.6, then the proposals in respect of the budget needs to be prepared by each of the directors, and a timetable needs to be agreed, which is part of the recommendation 3. And again, we're asking the directors to prepare budgets on the basis of those points in 2.6, which again, I'm not going to read out. In terms of the announcement from Welsh Government, we're not really certain when that's going to be. We assume the provisional settlement will be in December, and a final late decision in February, March, as it was this year. It doesn't help in setting budgets because we go down to the deadline. And if you recall, last year we had all special meetings, and I think that's a possibility again for next year. So in order to meet that deadline, we need to take these through proposals in Cabinet in November. Then we will ask each scrutiny committee to look at them, and they'll come back to the Cabinet in December, when we will put together an estimated budget. As usual, scrutiny committees will make some recommendations to that initial budget, and it will come back to us for consideration in the near future. In terms of the budget we considered by the working group, again, it'll go back to Cabinet in February 21, and it'll have to come back to Council in March. As I say, basically, we may have to hold a series of different meetings in order to make sure that we approve the budget within the working time frame, as we did last week. So I wish I'll stop through the area. The recommendations are before you. The timetable is before you. We have to have a meeting in the council to consider the budget and the council tax to be completed by the 1st of March this year, which is even sooner than it was last year. So it is going to be a difficult process. That is the process which we have to adhere to. Has anybody got any comments before I move the recommendation formally? No comments?
No.
In that case, can I have a second there, please?
Yeah, second.
Thank you. Is they all agreed? No dissent? I don't know if any officers going to make any comments. Sorry, I should have asked. Rob, you want to make comments or not?
Not on this report, Leader.
Okay, good. In that case, we agree that, yes?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. The next item is Strategic Collaborative Working Initiative update. It's a normal and regular report on the updating of the way we work with others. We usually receive quarterly reports, and we should have had one before now, but because of the pandemic, we haven't met to do so. The Appendix A shows the compendium of strategic working initiatives, which I will not go through because they are there to see. There are recommendations that we consider and note the strategic collaborative working initiatives that are in place to support the delivery of the council services and council's wellbeing outcomes and objectives. This report will be circulated to Vale Glamorgan Council elected members and members of the Public Service Board, and the further updates will be provided to Cabinet. As I said, compendium is in Appendix A. It maintains an oversight of our collaborative working. It's part of our reshaping services plan to go forward, because clearly we still have to make various savings. It's not exhaustive, because there are other works that are going on too. But the other thing which you need to realize is that when we last received an update, which was on the 3rd of February, It should have been brought to April, but we couldn't bring it there. So there are some things which have now been included and could have an impact because of COVID-19 within the report itself. In terms of things like the leisure centre contract, leisure centres are closed. Local authority partnership agreements, they've had to work in different ways. There's different regional collaborative groups that have had to work in different ways. Safer Vale Community Partnership has definitely had to work in different ways and have worked with us in terms of securing support for both our staff, our residents, and indeed helping through the NHS. In terms of the COVID-19, there was a coordinated cell established, and that's highlighted in 2.4. And it is a partnership between very many people, for example, council, police, probation, Cardiff and Vale Public Health, third sector representatives, and others from our local health and housing associations too. It's been added to the compendium, as the test, trace and protect program, which you should all know about in terms of checking whether or not anybody has had COVID-19 and therefore checking any new confirmed cases and anybody they've been in touch with. So that's been added too. And then we have another issue in terms of collaboration on local government reform. The Welsh Government Green Paper consultation document, Strengthening Local Government, Delivering for People, was issued on the 20th of March. It's a statement of intent about the future of local government in Wales. Cabinet considered it and the Council's response on the 6th of June. But there's also been the Local Government and Election Wales Bill, which was published on the 18th of November. And it's anticipated that now that's been delayed and the bill will go through in the end of the summer, hopefully. But sorry, it was the summer, now it's likely to be the new year. And it talks about things like reforming of electoral arrangements for local government, basically 16, 17-year-olds. Talks about general power of competence for councils. Talks about the reforming public participation. Talks about leadership of principal councils. It talks about the framework of powers to facilitate more consistent and coherent regional working through joint committees, etc. It talks about other issues in terms of ministers' support. Also talks about some voluntary mergers if you care to do it, and it also talks about finance, including non-domestic rates and council tax. We are putting together issues in terms of partnership with the Wales Local Government Association, and they've set up a working group. So that there will be further information brought forward to Cabinet as the bill progresses and guidance is developed, but clearly it needed to be reported to Cabinet as an update now. I don't know if anybody's got any comments in relation to this report. I don't know if Rob's got any comment in relation to this one. I think not.
Yes, thanks, Leader. I think the point you make about the pandemic is well made, because what you have seen is you haven't seen this report as intended in April, but that doesn't mean to say that the importance of collaboration hasn't gone away. Indeed, in the last 3 months, collaboration has been more important than ever. And we've got a really good partnership arrangement in South Wales across the Local Resilience Forum boundary, the South Wales Police boundary, and that's meant that we've been able to respond to the pandemic by working with our partners across the other local authorities, the police, the health boards, and the same is true for the recovery phase. So I just wanted to refer to that. And probably we need to include that in the next version of the report that comes to you, because that collaboration has been really important in enabling us to respond effectively to the coronavirus pandemic, particularly as we move into recovery. That's going to become even more important.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Anybody else any comments? No. Can I formally move the recommendations 1 to 3 on page 2, which I read out earlier?
And formally second, Leader.
Okay. Everybody agree?
Yeah.
Good, thank you. In that case, I'll move forward to the next item, which is the reinstatement of the timetable of meetings of council from September 2020 to May 2021. The reason for this is because, as you know, on the 23rd of March, we met as a cabinet and we suspended in agreement with other chairmen, etc., the mayor and chairman of committees, that we would suspend meetings. It is now time to start them back up again. This will start from September 20 to May 21. It sets a new date of the 14th of September 2020 for holding of our council's AGM, which was delayed from May. And there's obviously some caveats in terms of the dates within it, but hopefully we could at least be able to hold either virtual meetings or semi-virtual meetings, or meetings where people are in the council chamber. I don't really intend to go through the report at all, on the basis that we stopped meetings. We now need to start them up, and we have started them up in terms of this, for example, virtual meeting. We've had planning meetings, and I know there's a licensing meeting shortly. There's also an audit committee lately to come. There's a scrutiny committee which is going to be reporting back to us later in the agenda. So I'm going to recommend that the timetable of meetings that have been suspended as a result of COVID-19 continues from September 20, subject to any further changes and arrangements for meetings deemed appropriate by the mayor of the council or the relevant scrutiny committee. But I do put this caveat on it in relation to a reoccurrence of COVID-19, which could have an impact yet again on this. That the second recommendation is that, in pursuance of recommendation 1 above, the council's annual meeting be held on the 14th of September 2020. I don't see the point of going through the report. You can read it yourself, and it's basically just reinstatement of the meetings, and they are there as an addendum to the report. Can I formally move?
And I second, Leader.
Okay. Any other comments from anybody? Good. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the prevention of alcohol-related antisocial behaviour, resorts, town centres and public open spaces. And I think, Peter, you'll be taking this one.
Yes, Leader. Thank you very much indeed. I think it's right to place on record that the council does not tolerate. Sorry, I'm trying to balance my my folder without putting in front of my camera. The council does not tolerate antisocial behaviour on its resorts or public spaces, and what has become necessary is that we need to extend some of our public space protection orders to include new areas, but also to continue with the existing areas. And so this report comes forward. There are four recommendations at the beginning of the report, and perhaps the one I would draw everyone's attention to is that of number 4, which is to use Article 1414, the urgency procedure, because we do need to do this without any further delay than absolutely necessary. And with that, I move the 4 recommendations. Okay, I think it's important that we recognise that the pandemic is and the lockdown and the easing of lockdown has caused us some particular issues. I think we need to address those, and the only way to address them is through public space protection orders. I think it's a great way forward. The recommendations within it, and paragraph 2211 talks about proposals to add areas, because currently what happened is that we've in Appendix A, we already had one for Barry Island. That is to run out in October, so we need to renew it, but we're also adding those ones on 211. And the sooner we do it, the better, I think. Any comments from anybody? I don't know if either the Managing Director, Miles, Hunter, Marcus wants to make any comment. Ben, sorry, your hand's up. Yeah, Ben.
Thank you, Leader. I've been bowled over by the sheer number of residents of the Penarth Esplanade who've got in touch with me, and I know they have with a number of other councillors who have been distraught by the what they feel the nature and environment of the Esplanade having changed so dramatically in such a short period of time. And I think that's really crucial. I think it's also worth bearing in mind and repeating what Councillor King said. Underneath all of this should still be some personal responsibility. We're consulting on this order. I'm fully supportive of this moving forwards. If there are other areas identified during the consultation, these can be added. People contact me saying they want to add Windsor Gardens to the order as opposed to just the Penarth Esplanade. That can all come out within the order consultation. But this council hasn't stood still when it comes to dealing with issues. We became aware that members of the public were urinating in areas. We've extended the opening times of the toilets on the Esplanade. We've increased the frequency of the bins being collected. We're writing to licence holders to remind them of their obligations, and we will be looking to deal with infringements where they happen. But these things won't happen overnight, and it continues to be the need for public to take responsibility for their actions. And I'd far rather everybody realise the effect they have on the community than us having to bring in these orders that are then brought about. I'm pleased we're progressing this under urgency. I'm pleased we can get this as soon as possible in front of council to bring this order to fruition. But potentially that's at the end of the summer. So there are other measures we're taking to keep things in order. But the concerns of residents, and it's not just about the Esplanade, there's a long list of areas. I'm speaking now, as the ward member for Plymouth Ward, and the Esplanade is wholly within that, with the exception of a part by the Penarth Pier. And I really want people to understand, we understand, we hear what's happening there. We want to do all we can, but it's going to take a multi-pronged approach. We've made those representations to the police. We've changed the way our services are offered to try and increase the amount of cleaning that's there and opportunities for people to use conveniences. But this order is necessary. And I think that hopefully when it comes forward to council in whatever form comes at the end of the consultation, we'll be able to enact it and hopefully bring rebuild that environment that people love so much down on the Esplanade. So that's what I wanted to say on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Liz, do you want to come in?
Thank you. Yes, Leader. I think it's fair to say that we've been living in strange and unprecedented times. And sadly, the levels of unacceptable behaviour that we've witnessed in a number of areas across the Vale is not something that we would usually expect to have. It's not stuff that we experience. For example, we've had public space protection orders on Barry Island for years, but we haven't had to use them because people have been responsible. And so while we would not expect to be using these in everyday circumstances, it's not about stopping people having a picnic and having a can of beer in their cool box or whatever. We do need an armoury of tools that we can use, and tools that we can also enforce, because I think although we've worked closely in partnership with the police, we need measures that we can enforce as well, so that we can take action, and knowing that we can keep our public spaces safe and enjoyable for our local residents. Far too many have been inconvenienced over the past weeks during the pandemic, and we need to look at how we can be prepared to in order to stop that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think one thing it needs to be highlighted really is that the managing director and myself have written to the licensees on Barry Island, we've written to the licensees on Penarth Esplanade to remind them of their responsibilities, particularly while we're coming out of easing out of lockdown. But what I think shouldn't be lost on this report either is the fact that we do have public space protection order from 2017, and that's at Appendix A. And I think people have lost sight of the fact that it covers very, very many areas. And Liz is right. We haven't had to use it in many of them. I know we've used it in Barry Island once or twice in the past, but only very, very rarely. And that's right and proper. But what was also remembered is that this report covers those extra places that we covered within the report, which is Cosmston, Porthkerry, Penarth Pier and Esplanade, Ogmore Beach and surrounding common land, Lantern Major, Cwm Colliw, which was missing, and Roos Point, on the basis that they're the areas that have come forward since the pandemic is eased down. It's also important to remember that in recommendation 3, the Cabinet agrees that to the outcome of the consultation, any public and any proposed order to be varied and increased to be reported to Council, and that Council will hopefully be on September the 21st, because that's, I think, the next Council meeting we have after the AGM, after their annual meeting. But it also says, and it would also include any further recommendations for consideration. So this is not exclusive. If we think there is somewhere else, we can do something about it. And I think we are honor bound to do it. But let's not forget that by the on September the 21st, those in Appendix A still stand. And people need to remember that. So they need to be minded of that because they come and visit. But it is based on antisocial behaviour, and I think that's the important part. So I will say what I've said in my press releases. If you're going to come and behave yourself, fine. If you don't want to, if you're going to come and cause havoc, then we will do something about it, and we don't want you to come.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
Peter, you want to come in?
Sorry. Yeah, Leader, if I may, it's just picking up a comment you made earlier in that response. Generally speaking, we have had good support from our licensed traders.
Yes.
And I don't want them to be misconstrued anyway. Our biggest problem is people arriving with a significant quantity of their own alcohol, and this is the only way we can address that. So I think that I just wanted on record that it's not the licensed hospitality trade, it is the public sometimes who cause their own problems, and we have to have this method, this tool in our kit. Thanks.
Absolutely, and it's something which we've used, as I understand. We have confiscated alcohol of people who are coming off trains. So I don't know if anybody got any other comments. I don't know if any of the officers want to make any comment at this stage. Rob, do you want to make a comment? Ask you first.
Yeah, I just want to echo the comments of the Deputy Leader, really. This has been a particular issue since lockdown was eased, as people have been more able to go about and visit locations. And I don't think it's surprising that those areas in paragraph 2.11 on the report, they're predominantly coastal areas.
Yeah.
As we've seen more and more people flock to our coastline. Then unfortunately this report has become very necessary under those circumstances. I would just make one comment in terms of recommendations, if I may. Recommendation 4 refers to recommendations 1.1, 1.2 and 1.3. I think that should read 1, 2 and 3 just for completeness, to be accurate.
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
But other than that, I've got no other comments I want to make at this stage, other than to say that when you see the next report, on car parking arrangements, again in our coastal areas, you're aware, all Cabinet members are aware of the issues we've faced with in the last couple of months in our coastal areas, as we've seen an increase in number of visitors at what is a very sensitive time for people who live in these communities.
Okay, fair point. Miles, this is one of your reports. Would you make any comment or not?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I'm just grateful for Cabinet support. This is disappointing that we've come to this stage where, unfortunately, the bad alcohol-fueled behaviour by very few can affect very many, and our resource will suffer unless we take prompt action. We have taken significant amounts of alcohol from those arriving at Barry Island, and we will continue to do so. Also to say we won't stop policing these areas as best we can in the interim, and we're working jointly with our licensing officers and the police to make sure that these areas remain attractive. So I'm grateful for Cabinet support on this one.
It's had to be done. And Marcus, I know you're here. Do you want to make any comments? And no.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, just really thank you, Leader. Just to echo the comments, particularly with regard to the country parks. We have, since they've reopened, suffered problems. Actually, we suffered some problems before they reopened, but clearly this will help. and really encourage the right sort of visitor. So it's people who want to come and enjoy the park for what they are, the country parks for what they are, and the coast for what it is, rather than obviously just abusing alcohol. So yes, I think it'd be very helpful.
Okay. Does anybody else, any other officer wants to come in? Because I noticed there's some extra ones that I didn't see earlier. No. If that's the case, can Peter, you're formally moving the recommendations with the change to number 4, so it isn't 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. It's recommendations 1, 2, and 3.
Yes, please.
With that amendment,
can I formally second as amended?
you can indeed. Okay. Is there any disagreement? I think there's not. Somehow.
No.
Okay. Good. Thank you very much. In that case, we'll move forward to car parking displacement, coastal areas and other locations with high visitor numbers. And again, Peter, I think you're taking this report.
Yes, Leader, thank you. And it was interesting that the managing director has almost commenced the introduction for this report. It's perhaps been precipitated by matters that have arisen. But what I would like to say is this is a new policy and it is different from all previous incarnations. And I believe the report and its associated appendix are a comprehensive assessment that aims to address both the historic issues from displacement parking that may have been exacerbated by coronavirus-19 lockdown restrictions, as well as some of the new ones. And it complements the recent car parking guiding principles and charging policy we introduced, that will be implemented more fully when lockdown situation eases. I think it's important to place on record that we have taken account of significant public consultation responses received the first time that a new residence parking permit policy was mooted back in March 2019. And we've reflected upon the previous objections, specifically those of the cost to the affected residents, both the existing permit holders and proposed new ones. And we believe that what we are bringing forward addresses that very fairly. I should, however, point out that no new zone can or will be implemented before consulting with and obtaining agreement from the residents of the identified area, and that a further report considering the consultation responses to the traffic regulation orders required to implement car parking charging will be considered later in the year. I need to make a confession that the executive summary, specifically bullet point 8, omits Cowbridge, specifically in the vicinity of Middlegate Court, although it is clearly identified in the body of the report, paragraph 2.17. And for the avoidance of doubt, that area of Cowbridge is included in this initial scoping. In the case of these measures, I would draw your attention to recommendation number 6, which seeks the use of Article 14.14 emergency procedure, because we really do need to move, like with the previous report, we need to implement these recommendations as soon as we possibly can. And therefore I'm asking for that sixth one to be taken into account, and so I move the 6 recommendations at the beginning of this report.
And that's including the urgency procedure.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay, good. I think we've learned a lot in terms of displacement parking. I know that when we talked about car parking, charging, etc., we talked that we would look at displacement. This has given us an opportunity to do it. We've seen it firsthand. I think we've never done it before since South Glamorgan days. Never ever been anything. We considered it when we brought the other reports there, but clearly there was some discontent, and particularly in relation to funding or the cost of it to the residents. And this has been, I think, this has covered that too. So the control of parking is, I think, very reasonable. Is there anybody else who'd like to make a comment? I think Liz, got your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Only one thing that is very relevant to this is paragraph 3.10, in that historically residents' parking schemes have operated Monday to Friday, 9 till 5 or 8 till 6, or working hours in effect. And when we started looking at it, and it's why it's taken a little bit longer, we recognise that in our destinations, so, you know, resorts or near country parks and that sort of thing, that actually weekends and evenings can be a bigger problem in those areas. So we needed to be flexible so that, you know, in that paragraph, it actually says, you know, you'd be looking at those at times unless local characteristics dictate otherwise. So if you've got an area that tends to get hit with parking issues on weekends and holidays and things, we can be flexible for that. It's designed to be a strategic intervention, but also in the understanding that the restrictions that we bring in, we will be able to enforce.
Absolutely.
Again,
Yes.
so that people will know that if they contravene resident parking schemes, they will get caught and they will get fined. And in that way, we can protect local residents from the blight that a lot of them have suffered over past years.
Absolutely true. I think actually one of the most important parts about it is the fact that this is enforceable, and it's enforceable by us as an enforcement authority, and we need to move forward. Is there any other cabinet member who wants to say anything? Otherwise, I'll see if any. Yeah, Margaret.
I just want to move that I second Peter's recommendations because no one seconded it. So can I formally second his recommendations, please?
You can indeed. I'm sure somebody might have done mine, but yes. I'll go in order of I did before. Rob, do you want to say anything, and then I'll bring Miles in. If you want to say anything, you don't have to.
No, nothing on this occasion, Leader. Thank you.
Miles, it's your report.
Yeah, only quickly, just to say that it's important with these schemes that they are designed so they're fit for the residents that live in those areas. So one of the things I'm keen that we do is we have a discussion with them early on. So in effect, they help us to design the scheme. Only then, when we have an acceptable design to them, we'll be going through the traffic regulation order process. But we have huge amounts of knowledge since COVID. We knew about these areas in some degree anyway. So I'm looking forward to getting moving on this and getting the residents involved, because some of them have suffered for a very long time.
Indeed, and I know that I've had, and as many of us have, had correspondence with others, and we promised that we would do something. I think this covers it. Okay, is there any other officer who wants to come in? Because I see there are some other officers. If you do, speak now. Otherwise, I'm going to move the recommendations as they are. Okay, there's not. In that case, Peter, you've moved them, and 1414. Margaret seconded it. Any other? Is there any dissent? I don't think there will be.
No.
Good. Thank you very much. In that case, what I will do now is go to any other items that I decided are urgent, and the ones that are urgent is the reports from Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee. They've been issued to you earlier. There are two items to consider in terms of that. One was our report in terms of working towards recovery, which is the last last cabinet meeting, which went to scrutiny. They came up with some recommendations, and I'm scrolling through because I have it on my iPad. The first recommendation was that they noted the report in the appendix. The second one was that approach undertaken in respect of the development of recovery of the council's recovery strategy be noted. So that's fine. They then asked that further updates to the report be presented to the committee in due course, to include detailed qualitative and quantitative information, impact studies, and alignment to the Wellbeing and Future Generation of Wales Act. That is a matter for them, so that's good. They've asked for reports, nothing for us to get involved in. And the third one is that the discussion at the meeting be forwarded to Cabinet for its consideration, having regard to members' comments relating to continued communication with organisations and elected members. In terms of that, I was at the meeting, as were many of us here. There was an issue which was, and I want to kill it if I can, is that there was an issue there saying that officers were making decisions and some of the members and group leaders weren't involved.
what I said at the time, and what I'll say again, is that we're in the middle of a pandemic, we're in the middle of a crisis. We were having things thrown at us on a daily basis. Welsh Government were giving us announcements, and decisions had to be made there and then by the GOAL team and our management team. They did so using emergency powers, but they didn't do so without the authority of the cabinet members, myself, the deputy leader, and the relevant cabinet member. So there has been total scrutiny in terms of this, in terms of members' involvement. In terms of members being kept informed, all members have been informed on a virtually daily basis in terms of things like the COVID-19 situation. In terms of the emergency powers, there's been regular reports confirming what the emergency powers are and the reasons behind them. So I think that members have been kept informed, but more particularly, if members were concerned about any issue, then all they needed to do was either pick up the phone or email me. And I have to say, I have had several conversations with several of the other leaders. Ben is obviously one of them. He's a member of this. And in terms of the other coalition leader, Councillor Gwyn John, I've had constant contact with them too. In terms of anybody else, if anybody wanted to contact me, they could, and I've had none. The other thing is in terms of where we sit in terms of meeting with others. We continually meet with different organisations. The report made that was perfectly clear that we meet with, I met with all the other Welsh leaders, I met with the Welsh ministers. We've taken decisions based on guidance and information from Welsh Government, and they had to be done on a very quick basis. And apart from that, we've also worked with very many partners, as was contained in one of the reports that's been here today. So I'm content that what we have done has been necessary, practical, and the only way forward under the circumstances. I see Ben's got his hand up. Would you make any comment?
Thank you, Leader. First of all, a slight admin comment. In the recommendations, there's 2.3s, so it should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's 1, 2, 3, 3, 4. I think in terms of the points you make about contact and working with other organisations, I'd like to put on record how proactive colleagues within social services have been in dealing with outside organisations. Before lockdown was even initiated, we were having weekly conference calls with care providers. We were making sure we understood what was going on. In terms of the numbers of people who've been affected, the number of deaths in care homes, the number of instances and testing, that's all being shared with members. That's all come through on those updates from Public Health Wales. And where we've had to take emergency powers decisions, I've been involved in all of the ones involving social services, and they've been reported fortnightly to members. I've had no contact from any other group leader with concerns about what's going on in social services. I have also shared through the corporate parenting panel stuff relating to children's services, and we've had constructive conversation with certain members on issues there. So I remain open right the way through the summer to anyone who wants to contact. We obviously have our council meeting in September that's been alluded to in an earlier item, but we continue to work daily on this subject. It's not going to go away because it happens to be August. And so if any member of the council wishes to have a meeting or discuss the issues in social services, I continue to remain available for those meetings. So I just didn't want to let that point lie, because I think from both officers and as I passionately said at our last cabinet meeting, the work that carers have done during this pandemic has been extraordinary. And we've had to deal with things on a very quick turnaround, which has meant that we've had that emergency powers procedure as you've laid out. But that certainly doesn't preclude any member from questioning and calling us or dealing with us or calling an informal meeting. So please, if people are wanting to talk more than happy to. And as we get back to these reinstated scrutiny meetings and so forth in September, we can have those debates. But I don't want to hear people tell me they haven't heard anything, because that's absolutely not true. Thank you.
And while you've been speaking, there's been an email just come in from emergency planning to tell everybody what the current situation is today.
Yeah,
it's currently there. Okay, thank you for that, Ben. There was a further recommendation that they gave, which I forgot to read out, which was that the report be forwarded to trade unions within the Vale of Glamorgan, as well as all elected members, members of the Public Service Board, and town and community councils. I see no reason why not, but all the members would have had a copy anyway, because they had it because it was on the Cabinet and Scrutiny Committee agenda. But just for belt and braces, I'm happy for that to happen. I see no reason why not. Is there anybody else? Yes, Liz, you've got your hand up, please.
Sorry, leading me again.
No,
so in the scrutiny meeting, there was discussion of arrangements in our town centres and how we were working to both provide support for social distancing and to keep shoppers safe. There were a few misunderstandings about the number or the scale of intervention that had happened in our town centres, and also the amount of contact that we'd had in an ongoing manner with traders in our town centres. So I was able to explain that, say, for example, in Penarth, only 14 spaces had actually been taken out, that we have regular contact with traders in 5 different shopping centres, normally on either a weekly or fortnightly basis, and that's been happening probably for about 2 months now, I think, Peter, if I'm mistaken.
Yes.
And we've got our next meetings tomorrow. Throughout that process, the arrangements in those town centres have actually been adjusted to reflect the ongoing situation. And I was in 2 town centres in the last few days talking to local people and keeping them up to date on the progress. So I was happy to clarify the situation for the members of the scrutiny committee, as I think they were slightly unaware of the reality of the situation.
Okay, fair point. And I think one of the things that we did when we knew there was easing of lockdown, we wanted to make sure we had maximum coverage, just in case people did flock back. Clearly, they have not flocked back at the numbers we thought they might have. So, and everything is currently under review and will continue to be under review. Okay, if any other member, if no other member, I can ask any officers want to come in. Again, I'll start with Rob, if he wants to come in or not. Options.
Nothing from me, Leader.
Thank you. Miles, anything from you?
Nothing from me, Leader.
Marcus, because I know you've been involved in town centres, particularly. No.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, just to reiterate really what Councillor Burnett has said. You know, obviously we've tried to involve all the town centres and all representatives, both from town councils and from the traders' organisations, to ensure that we, obviously any actions we have taken have been in their knowledge, and we've listened to any comments they've had going forward. Obviously, you know, it is a changing situation constantly, and ultimately it's about safety, but also making sure that the town centres feel safe for people to come back and comfortable for them to use. So that's always been our intent, to ensure the businesses can survive this and get through the crisis.
Okay, thank you. Debbie, I know you're there. Debbie Miles is there. She must have the same thing in relation to this, because I know that we've been dealing with things like orders and looking at guidance and legislation that's come forward. So we're following all of that.
Yeah, and I also wanted to add that the decisions that have been made under the emergency powers have been in line with the Cabinet report of the 23rd of March and in line with the Constitution. So I'm satisfied on that front. And similarly, we've been publicising those decisions. We've been circulating on a regular basis those decisions and also displaying them on the website. So I'm certainly satisfied that everything is in order on a procedural basis.
Good, thank you. And there's Caris, I know she's in there, and I missed it up when I was doing the finance, but if she wants to say anything in relation to this.
No, nothing from me. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, good. Right, in that case.
Leader, can I just, can I second this?
Yeah, so basically, I think we're noting the comments, and we've done what they asked in terms of considering the issues that were raised, and I think that we can confirm that we believe that everything has been carried out reasonably, efficiently, and effectively, which is what I'd hope would happen, because we're in a abnormal situation. Let's be honest.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So is everybody happy with that? And we'll move on to the next recommendation, which is in relation to the Public Service Board report, which we dealt with, was sent to Corporate Performance and Resources. And if I'm going to find it, the wrong report, sorry. The wrong one, sorry. I'm trying to find them on my iPad. Their recommendation in relation to the Public Service Annual Report was that they noted the report and the priorities set out in there. What they did ask is that Cabinet be informed that in future the Scrutiny Committee considered it appropriate that the regular reports on the Public Service Board priorities and strands be referred to the relevant Scrutiny Committees in order that more in-depth scrutiny within their remit can be undertaken within their respective Scrutiny Committee work programmes. The reason I asked for that was because in terms of reporting the Public Service Board is a standalone board, as you know. It comes to Cabinet and we send it to Corporate Resources, being the lead committee. They considered there were issues within the Public Service Board remit that could have a benefit to discussion, scrutiny by those other scrutiny committees within the Council. And to be perfectly honest with you, I think that's a reasonable request. I think it's a reasonable thing to do because it does properly scrutinise the work of the Public Service Board. So I have absolutely no problem with that, and I would endorse that as a very good way forward, because even though Public Service Boards have been in existence for a couple of years, it is still embryonic in many ways, and I think it would be beneficial for all members of all scrutiny committees to have the opportunity to look at the work. If anybody's got any comments in relation to that, but I think I would endorse that as a reasonable way forward.
Yeah.
Is that agreed?
Yeah.
Good. And nobody's got. Rob, you showed your camera. Do you want to say anything in relation to this?
I was just going to support what you said, Leader. It makes perfect sense, and it's a way for all the scrutiny committees to be cited on the work of the PSB.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, that's good. That was easy. And then any items left would be item 8, which is the review of the Welsh Government consultation papers. I know that I think some members, some officers have decided they would leave the meeting on the basis that they could be perceived to have an interest in terms of elections in particular. Debbie Miles is the electoral returning officer. The report talks about Welsh Government passing that over to, or some of it over to the Managing Director. And I think both intend to leave.
That's correct. That's correct, Leader.
Yeah,
that's correct, Leader, but Debbie has got her hand raised at the moment, so you
Yeah.
just...
yes,
all right, yes, sorry, I couldn't see it. Debbie?
All I wanted to say, just for the record, the same as Rob, I'll be leaving the meeting now as I have an interest in the report.
Yep, that's fine. Good. And indeed yourself, Rob. So thank you for being with us, and we'll talk to you soon, I'm sure. Okay, looking at who's left. They have left, that's not an issue. In that case, the next item is item 8, or the old 8. Review of the Welsh Government consultation papers, the draft Senedd Cymru representation of the people Amendment Order 2020, and the draft Senedd Cymru disqualification order 2020. So it's going to be, I think Eddie's going to bring this one forward.
Okay. Thank you, Leader. I'm accepting that my microphone's working. Yes,
you're fine.
Thank you. We've had the report before you before, so I'll read through some key points. We've got the executive summary, which the Welsh Government issued in June 2020, 2 consultation papers relating to draft orders, which relate to the Senedd Cymru elections to be held in May 2021. And these are the draft Senedd Cymru representation of people Amendment Order 2020 and the Draft Senedd Cymru Disqualification Order 2020. The consultation documents are attached at Appendix A and D. The draft orders attached at Appendix B and E, proposed responses at Appendix C and G respectively. This report is seeking approval of the proposed responses and draws to the attention of all members the ongoing consultations which close on 8th and 1st of September 2020 respectively. There are some key considerations, and if you look in the report you'll see that the draft order proposes amendments to the National Assembly for Wales, which primarily sets out the rules of conduct of elections. Some of the proposed amendments reflect Welsh Government policy decisions and legislative changes, and these include those introduced by the Senedd and Election Wales Act 2020. And interestingly, they address issues such as Senedd Cymru change in name, so that's something which we're all aware of. The extension of the Senedd franchise to 16 and 17-year-olds and associated provisions as enacted by the Senedd and Elections Wales Act 2020. But also in doing that, they'll have to make sure the protection of information about persons under the age of 16 years old. It also provides consultation on extension of the Senedd franchise to qualifying foreign citizens. That's a key area which is relevant to us in the Vale. The disqualifications are aligned with the Senedd and Election Wales Act 2020 and the Government of Wales Act 2006. There's also an important feature is the withholding of publication of candidates' addresses, and this will align with other legislation permitting candidates to withhold their home addresses from publication, including where a candidate acts as his or her own agent. One of the key areas is the removing the payment of a fee to returning officers. As you're aware, the officers are elect on that basis. The proposal to make a payment to all electoral teams for running the Senedd Cymru elections in 2021, with the possibility of an additional amount being paid to those teams dealing with the regional administration aspects of the election, reflecting the remit of the regional returning officer, and also enabling codes of practice to be introduced by the Electoral Commission relating to election expenses for candidates at Senedd Cymru elections. The second draft order and its disqualification order, as that's Appendix D, this is in line with the general principles as recommended by the Constitutional and Legislative Affairs Committee, and that's already spoken of. It gives a list of offices which disqualified persons holding them being a member of the Senedd, and supplements disqualifying officers as set out in the Government of Wales Act 2006. And attached to the Appendix F is a list of the disqualifying officers. So it's quite an important piece of legislation that's coming in, consultations on there. I put before you the recommendations. The Cabinet endorses the proposed responses attached to this report at Appendix C and G. In respect to the Welsh Government's consultations on the draft Senedd Representation of the People Amendment Order 2020 and the draft Senedd Cymru Disqualification Order 2020, and that the responses to the consultation will be submitted to the Welsh Government prior to the 8th and 1st September 2020, and that this report is shared with all members of the Council to raise the awareness of the Welsh Government's ongoing consultations, and that the urgent decision procedure set out at the sections 14 Council's Constitution will be used in respect of the recommendations 1 to 3 above. So I so move.
Second that, Leader.
I think you're on mute, Neil.
Sorry, I was, because my phone rang. There's it's quite a complicated set of arrangements which obviously need to be addressed. There were the responses which need to be endorsed, so I have no issues in terms of it, to be honest. The responses are quite straightforward, I think, and quite clear. So I don't know if anybody else got any comments, Eddie?
Yeah, I haven't actually looked and referred to the comments, but they're quite clear. They're in the report. So yep. As you're aware, that the responses are by the officers, the executive Managing Director, and Debbie Marr. So they're there for a good reason. They've been removed from the meeting, so they're quite.
They have a direct relationship to it. So as far as they're concerned, they have nothing to do with this. As far as I'm concerned, this is coming from us. So right, moving the recommendations. Unless anybody's got any comments.
Catherine.
I'll second the recommendations.
Thank you, Catherine.
And also just to say, as the youth champion, having spoken to the youth cabinet and the workers in our youth service departments, young people are really interested and they're really keen. So it's going to make a big difference to them. And I know that our electoral departments are very supportive of encouraging them and explaining them how to get involved in the process. So they're really looking forward to the ability to be able to vote.
Okay, good. That's interesting to know that they've considered it too. So that's fine. If there's no other comments, we all agree, no dissent.
Yeah,
that's fine. In that case, I have no issues under part 2. So I will close the meeting and thank you for your attendance. Thank you for the officers' attendance too. And I'll see you in a little while, I guess, but also we'll still be working during the summer. So in fact, I'll see you sometime then. If not, I'll see you at the next meeting. So thank you for your attendance. Cheers.
thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you, leader.